In the last 24 hours, Bitcoin's extended its downtrend to 11 days, now down $15,000 from the $124,000 all-time high, also taking out two key support levels around the $110,000 to $112,000. This is suggesting further downside to go. How much further? What can we expect for a turnaround? And what is it that I'm doing with my portfolio when it comes to Bitcoin and Ethereum after running out the time frames to the upside? There's a sale on TIA Premium where I'll dive further into the portfolio. Link to that is in the top of the video description. As always, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, as this is something that we talked about 2 weeks ago in this video here, the August rally and crash, how I'm investing this time. That was on the 7th of August as we saw very similar seasonal patterns to the upside. And of course, hit the like button if you do find value from the content. Bitcoin looks like it's about to break down yet again from this low of $109,000. The signals that I'm looking at now are fear and greed, the 3-bar rule, which I'll show you for Bitcoin and for the stock markets. And then of course, how long does this go on for the seasonal pattern before we potentially see any further upside? Along with that, price targets to the downside. So I've covered the downtrend. It's broken the levels here. Therefore, the market would be expecting further downside to the next support levels. So I'll bring up this level here, and that is around $107,500. That comes from the double top. So this is the shorter term double top. So I'm not getting too carried away with the market or the cycle being over at this stage, because this is just coming from a daily double top. We'd be looking at something major or a macro breakdown if it came from more like a weekly or a long-term weekly setup or even a monthly setup. But at the moment, this is just a daily double top setup. It broke past the 50% level right there. You can see it cleanly broke it after the all-time high, so a very quick reversal, and then ran down. It broke those levels cleanly, which suggests it had further downside. And I gave you this a couple of days ago, actually, as it was breaking down, to look at the 150% level for this target. So within a 24-hour period of late last week, Powell talked about not cutting the rates, where the market I thought was going to get rugged. The next day talks about the rates possibly going to get cut. The market spikes up, and then everyone gets rugged yet again. And from that rug pull, we now find ourselves down even further, tempting the 107, potentially down to the $100,000 level. But I think this is part of the Q3 seasonal pattern, because we've seen it before around quarter three. Quarter three of 2024, there was July, a run up, and then a failure into August, and then a higher low in September. Quarter four came around and we had October, November, December. The year before that was another slow period, basically a dump here in August. That's nearly exactly 2 years ago. The market basically went sideways, a quick dump into September, and then the higher low in October. The year before that, you saw a fall in August, even though the market, well, in this case, Bitcoin was already down roughly 70%. Had a rally in that July period, and then a dump in August into a low of September. It rattled around until October, quick flush out for November, and then the consolidation happened. The year before that, this is 2021, the market found a low in July, ran up, hit August, slightly higher in the first part of September, and then sold off when there was some Evergrande news around China and their housing bubble getting exploded there, basically the bubble popping. And then of course the market ran higher for quarter three. It was very short-lived, so that's something to pay attention to should we see things turn around quickly. There was only about a month of actual gains from that point, even less if you take out this consolidation. And if we take that out, let's have a look at the days in total. 21 days, so about 3 weeks. So there is still a lot of talk about higher and higher prices. If we can find the articles here. Arthur Hayes talking about 20 grand. Of course, this comes out around the top. $10,000 and $20,000. There's talks from Bitwise and Tom Lee for $30,000, $60,000 Ethereum. And there was obviously talks around Bitcoin hitting $150,000, $200,000, $300,000. And now, of course, it's down at $109,000. Talking about the seasonality, take it back another year, 2020, August around these tops. It ran into a low in early September, higher low later September, another higher low early October, higher low mid-October, and then the market started to run in that later part of Q4. You can take it back into 2019. And I think you're getting the idea here. You got the July, bit of a bounce here into August, and then there was still selling off that happened into September and October. Quick rally, and then basically the consolidation happened for that next move. Slightly different times in the cycle, which is going to show up as different strength and weakness for that time. But when it comes to the pattern and the structure itself, you typically see that weakness in the Q3 period, which is similar to what I've covered here with the August rally and crash, and mark them all off on the chart with the reason for why they were happening. But there's always a new reason each cycle, but the pattern seems to follow through on each of those cycles. Now, on top of that, I had the 3-bar signal. So these were the 3 signals that I'm looking at here. We've covered the seasonality. 3 bars also showed up on the futures market for Bitcoin and the futures market for the stock markets. So what we're looking at here are key turning points, so very significant turning points, not just any turning point on the way up or the way down. This works in reverse as well. This is essentially a trend change signal. And if the trend changes, it doesn't mean that the cycle is over. It doesn't mean that the final top is in. It can just be a local top, and then it's going to take a considerable amount of time, more so than any of the corrections leading up to that point, generally speaking. So I just say that nice and simply and slowly, because that doesn't mean the cycle is over. But you can see these corrections, they haven't lasted that long, and then it breaks to new highs a week or two later. This time here, we're into that phase now. This is for the S&P 500. Currently at 11 days, 7 trading days, coming up to 2 weeks underneath that all-time high after the signal came in at the top. 1, 2, 3 from the all-time high. The Bitcoin futures market, all-time high, which also failed at a 50% level. Here is the extension to the upside, failed dead on 50%. 1, 2, 3, and here we are. So this correction's likely going to last longer than the last one, and potentially the one before that too, which then means it's just going to need more time for this consolidation. And if the bull market is then invalidated, we'll know with any sort of breakdowns from the key turning points. One in particular is the June low, roughly around $99,000. But back to the timeframes of the consolidations, which is what I said at the beginning of the video. I want to have a look at how long could these take. That correction, 32 days for the futures market, but for the spot market here, the stuff on Coinbase and Binance and so on, this was about 31 days, roughly the same, basically a month. As I said earlier, it's about 11 days down to this point. So unless the market breaks the 99K, then things are pretty much going similar to prior cycles. And of course, breakdowns can happen, but they need to get a closing basis above those key support and resistance levels so that the bullish structure maintains. We often see wicks and the big fear comes out. We saw it at the low here. We've seen it here. We've seen it in August. See it quite often. And then the market basically can recover. Like March was a very, very good example in 2023. Bullish until proven otherwise. And time is still essentially playing out here for the consolidation. So S&P 500, similar sort of pattern here. NASDAQ also the same signal, all-time high price, 24,000 points, 1, 2, 3, and then it continued on. So more consolidation. Ideally now for the stock markets is that they don't break these the structure here, roughly around 22,600 for the NASDAQ on the futures. That brings it back to the highs here at 22,300. So if it can remain there, and the same thing for the S&P, roughly 62. That would give it more strength for when the time is up for the consolidation and it can start to break higher. Otherwise, if it comes from a lower price point, then it's got to do a lot more work to get back to those higher prices. On top of that, Bitcoin's high targets, I've talked about the mid 130s and mid 160s. This is something that I posted in January of 2025, and we've hit that around that 122. So a few of these are getting hit now, and I think obviously I've talked many times about getting closer to the end of the cycle, and as I start to see more of these forecasts coming in, especially towards this peak, that's signaling to me that there's less time to go as we've hit more and more of these particular targets. Bitcoin 122, and then somewhere around that 144 for this year. So I'm still looking at the mid 130s for reasons I've given previous videos. So let's see if we can get to the mid 140s. Now, we've talked about the cycle itself for Bitcoin into quarter three. That's just another representation of it here on the chart. The pullback, the consolidation, and then the rest of the year ideally should be up. I'm not saying it's going to be this hard and fast, but it should be up for that period. So we'll know if this is changing because we'll see that breakdown from key lows, and that's then going to suggest that I'll have to change things in my portfolio. And I'll be talking about that with TIA Premium members. There is a sale on TIA Premium today, link in the top of the video description as usual. And you can also check out the traders results as well in the trading results over here, and of course the TIA review. So check that out if you wish. Now the forward returns for Bitcoin are generally 66% red and 33% green. About 5 days to go. It seems like we could be in for another red August, which is going to then tick that up further for more reds, bringing it down to 31% potential for a green in future years. But the good news after that is that typically through these stages of the cycle, we would see a green September. We don't want to see another red September. That could be a little bit dire for the rest of the cycle. A green September is the ideal next stage if August is going to be the red September, and that's essentially what the data suggests here. Now, MicroStrategy is also having a tough time. This is one of the timing indicators towards the end of the cycle. We've hit now the 9 months from the spike top for MicroStrategy, and it has not hit a new all-time high. So although it is stronger than 2021, it seems like time is very much running out, if not already run out for MicroStrategy, and it won't put in a new all-time high unless it can very quickly get back above these lows. Look at this white line here. It's got to get back above about 360, 365 on a closing basis for multiple days, at least 3 days here, to attempt another crack at 400 and 450, two key levels overhead. If this is the lower swing high testing the previous support, that potentially becomes resistance, and we see further downside here for MicroStrategy. Ideally, especially for the bulls, closes above 360 relatively soon. That's the only saving grace here for MicroStrategy. It hasn't broken down the major 50%, nor these lows at $230. So it's in a much weaker position now for the stage of the cycle, but it can still get back above. The Fear and Greed Index continues to look like it's resetting. So again, to the point of the things are looking similar to what happened last time. We've got the Fear and Greed Index in neutral for multiple days. Just a single day so far in fear. Could be a little more time yet again for the market sentiment to reset here. It's what we've seen previously, and we also see the liquidations continuing to creep up here. It was around 900 million earlier today, so that's lots of leveraged players getting washed out. The beauty about this is that we need to see the leverage get washed out so that there can be consolidation and the next move come through. The USDT dominance climbing higher. So this is still okay for now, but we've talked many times about their bases being formed and then the market running up. Ideally, we don't see the USDT dominance cross above 4.8 to 5%. And that, if it doesn't, good signs, we could potentially see it come back down, and then we get this final leg into the top. Otherwise, closes above that level, that's going to be really, really difficult now for the cycle to continue. Maybe you'll see it come back down, but it could most likely be in a higher low for the USDT dominance and a lower high for the Bitcoin and cryptos, meaning Bitcoin and cryptos might do this and they start to come back up. Everyone gets excited, really, really excited, puts in a lower high. So major excitement there. And then it all starts to come crashing down. And in the meantime, USDT dominance is running up, coming back down into a higher low. And then it starts to rise. So this going up, very bad for Bitcoin and cryptos. Rejected, coming down, great stuff here for Bitcoin and crypto. So again, more time required. Bitcoin dominance also ran up in the last 24 hours. Of course, Ethereum's been crushed in the last 24 hours. The downside target here is still about 56%, and this is for that mega quote-unquote altcoin season that everyone's waiting for. But if we don't get that, well, it's pretty much just going to be rotation back from altcoins into more Bitcoin and obviously Ethereum as well. Speaking of Ethereum, it's had a pretty rough 24 hours, down 8.5% from the all-time high, now down 13%. So if you are an Ethereum holder, I suggest listening carefully at this point. The best case scenario, and then I'll run it down to the worst case scenario. Best case scenario is we see consolidation above $3,800, roughly around that 4K at the tops. Basically no closes underneath the 3,800. But yeah, consolidation through that period. And that would be a 24% correction. Now it's done many of those corrections in the past, 32% from this high, 29% from that high, 29% from that high, but of course it went lower and it also went lower here. I'm just looking at significant tops to where it crashed down. You get a lower high forming. So there's another opportunity to sell some of the whatever you're holding and then dumping here. Of course, in this case, we're looking at Ethereum. So it ran up and then it dumped again. So in those significant or those first moves from the highs, ETH typically does roughly around 20 to 30%. This low here, 25%. The first real dumpage low, about 18% till it got to here at 29%. And then the first real dump low here, again, 25%. And then it came all the way down to 28% before held out and then pretty much crashed to 47 and 66%. So I'm not talking about that so far. It's just these first moves out of the highs can be that significant. And it can still be that significant and remain in a bullish structure because like we're looking at with $3,800, that's only down about 23% from the high. Now it seems ridiculous in many cases. People don't believe that Ethereum's got further to go, but it has run up now 137 days. 133 days was last time, 152 days the time before, 158 days the time before that. The down moves here, similar sort of time frames, 179, 146, 114, and then all of these corrections have been very, very shallow. So it seems like it is coming to a point that Ethereum needs to either consolidate these moves or, worst case scenario, that is the final high for the cycle. Of course, it's basically a double top now with the previous cycle top, and that's why I've talked about this being the best, strongest consolidation for Ethereum now above that 3,800, which was the previous top, and 4,000 are those the previous cycle tops as well. That's going to be a good sign for Ethereum to keep pushing higher. So we can retire this short-term 50% because it's broken down. Next targets to the downside are roughly around $4,100. ETH BTC has also had a rough day, pulling back underneath the 4% level, at least for the time being. If Bitcoin consolidates where it is in that same price range, $100,000, $110,000, and Ethereum pulls back, then the 30% here on ETH versus BTC could come all the way back to 3%. So 3% of Bitcoin's value because we're comparing ETH to Bitcoin. So that is still technically in its strong half of the tool, basically looking at it from the low to the high of this significant run. That's okay. It's still in a strong position, but breaks underneath that, then things are going to get a little bit weaker for the rest of this cycle for ETH. So that's why I think it's important now to be watching ETH and where those support and resistance levels are coming in. Do you start to lock in some of those gains and keep some on the table in case it does go a little higher here? Do you play it conservative or you just say, stuff it, I'm keeping all of it in. I can rough out a 30% decline thereabouts and wait for any of those next moves to the upside. Entirely up to the individual. Now, the others dominance chart, this is for the altcoin season, again, also had another rough day here, but it's still putting in higher lows. So like we can see for the majority of these charts, there hasn't been any signs that the bull market structure is broken and then it's about to collapse, and that was it. We saw the top. It just looks like it still needs more time to consolidate the moves and the hype and the market sentiment that we've seen over the last month or so leading into those tops. Those couple of months actually, more so leading into those final tops. And like we can see with the total 3 charts, this includes the top altcoins, obviously excluding Bitcoin and ETH. This is total 3. Any pullbacks here as well, around $910 to $950 billion is still going to be part of the consolidation before the next move. And of course, the excitement really took off in July 7th, July 14th, those 2 weeks there as it broke out into fresh highs. And then for the last 5 to 6 weeks, it's basically been consolidating above this $900 billion level. Of course, breakdowns from that, big time weakness, because now you're back into this zone here, and that's not where you want to see the market. You want to see it consolidate at these highs before it starts to move again. Solana, again, same sort of thing. It got rejected at 210 over the last 2 days, a big push down, and failed underneath 50%, so the $195. Again, not bad signs. It's still putting in higher lows. So we're seeing the strength, but it keeps getting met with selling volume as it hits those resistance levels. On the way up, it keeps putting in higher lows. So the thing to note here is if you see that structure break down on any of your altcoins, in particular these major charts here looking at others and total 3, if you start to see that structure break down below those higher lows, then it's probably going to take longer to get to any sort of alt season, or alt season is cancelled. We're not there at this point. It just keeps getting sold off leading into those highs. Now, XRP put in the high in July and hasn't gone anywhere basically for August. Needs to consolidate above 260. Otherwise, we're looking at the time frame yet again that it has done for its entire 11-year history, whereby it can only manage 12 to 13 months in any sort of trend. At the moment, low to the current high is 12 months. We're in the 13th month, but this month has not given us a new high. So therefore, looking at 12 months from the low to the high so far. Currently 37 months up from the June 2022 low. And in previous cycles, XRP has done 42 months from a significant low to the final all-time high for that cycle. So that's why I'm looking at June 22. That could take us out to December if XRP could push that little bit further for this cycle. Otherwise, 12 months looks pretty well on point with what it's done in the past, 12 to 13 months. So there we have it. Bitcoin now has done 12 days in a row, coming up to $16,000. It has overbalanced in price, but not in time yet. That time target is out towards the middle of September, right around the interest rate announcement from the Fed. So stay tuned for that. Watch these support and resistance levels for strength and weakness. Next price target is very close for Bitcoin, around 107,500. Don't forget the sale on TIA Premium today. Learn how to manage your portfolios, especially through these tough times. Like and subscribe if you haven't already. You made it this far in the video, and I'll see you guys at the next one. Take care. Peace out.